We are up to just a few psukim into Sefer Breisheet, Parshat Toldot, Perek Chav Hey, chapter 25. We are up to verse 23. Vayomer Hashem la shnei goyim bevitnech ushnei leumim mimayach yiparedu uleom milaom ye'ematz v'rav ya'avod sa'ir. We learned about the idea that in fact Rivka Imenu receives an answer from Hashem. Rashi, it's a shaliach of Hashem. Rashbam, it's a navi of Hashem, and Ibn Ezra says maybe it was from Avram Avinu himself. He was, after all, alive until the boys turned 15, and so on and so forth. There are various ideas about who it might have been. We did discuss this issue last week extensively on the various ways in which there are existential questions that Rivka Imenu confronts. I see some hands, but if you don't mind, give me 3 minutes just to cue things up, and I'm very happy to take questions, of course, and comments. The reality that the questions Rivka Imenu is asking are either about her physical symptoms or existential angst about the reality that she has to undergo a painful experience of pregnancy after 20 years of tefillah and what that means for her, and the doubt about the next steps. Again, she doesn't know that she has twins within her. She only finds that out from the Navi, again, or from Hashem, the Ruach HaKodesh, right? The concept that some elucidate, Rashi, quoted from the Medrash, when she walks by a Beit Midrash, there's kicking. When she walks by a Beit Avodah Zarah, there's kicking. How could there be such contradictions within her? And the Beit Midrash is variously understood as the Beit Midrash of Shem and Aver, which has some symbolic import, to put it out there. The idea that Shem and Aver, Shem, the son of Noach, Aver, the descendant of Shem, and the idea that they carry a certain Torah, a certain knowledge about Hashem and about how to act in this world that is being brought to bear through their Beit Midrash, but only when you go there, when you pass by. And some prenatal ability of feti, if that's the plural, I've neglected to look it up since we last learned, to understand, is this is a place I want to be? And just the consideration of what that means. There's something almost instinctive, ingrained about each of the children, about their nature and their biology. But when you look at the next pasuk, at first blush, it makes it sound like there is going to be some kind of, I guess, conflict that is irreversible, right? So, Vayomer Hashem la shnei goyim, there's two nations in your womb. Two nations are two nationalities will emerge and separate from within you, from your innards, your me'ayim. And ulaom milaom ye'ematz v'rav ya'avod sa'ir, variously understood as some kind of conflict. There will be one group that will be trying to overtake the other. And of course, is that supposed to bring relief to a mother who's in pain, maybe existentially, about the fact that she's having the children of her dreams from 20 years, and the reality that they are going to be in conflict? Like that's a solace. It clarifies, but obviously, it makes them feel, unfortunately, like, again, who wants to give birth to a Russia? Yeah. So there's a question here, just on the level of pshat, but how to understand this. So we'll have to explain and explore it a little bit more in depth. Shelley had some questions. Go ahead. Someone is buzzing. I don't know who that is.
Pshat is pshat, right? In verse 23, Hashem is Hashem talking to her. So I don't see Vayomer Hashem la. So how can it be that it's an angel, or it's a Navi, or it's Abraham? It's Hashem. Do we have any occasions, I can't look it up fast enough, where Hashem is talking to Yitzchak?
Well, I mean, right here in Parshat Toldot, there's going to be an example where Hashem speaks directly to Yitzchak.
Where?
That's in verse 2, in chapter 26, verse 2. Bit of a nuanced language difference there, because it says, Vayera elav Hashem. Hashem appeared to him.
Okay.
And here it says Hashem spoke to her. Again, and the implication, according to most of the Mefarshim, seems to be that there is going to be some kind of a Navi or intercessor in the middle. But we had seen last time also, one of the sources, I can't recall now who, says no, she heard directly from Hashem. She was a Neviah.
That's what it appears to be from
On the level of Pshat, right?
And Peshat doesn't mean that you're going to have two kids, one of whom's going to be a Russia. The Peshat is is nation down the road. There's going to be this problem. Why does she necessarily think that it's going to be, I'm going to have one bad kid and one good kid, and I'm going to favor one kid and my husband's going to favor another, and we're going to create this disaster? It really reminds me of the Delphi Oracle more than it does our religion. There's a tragedy kind of thing, almost inevitable kind of tragedy that Rabbi Sachs, of blessed memory, would say we don't believe in.
Interesting. Well, we have to understand what the psukim mean. I mean, on the level of pshat, it sounds like she was told there are two nations within you, two peoples, right? Two peoples, two nations. Doesn't that sound that way?
Nations are farther on down the line. This is what's going to happen in the far future. It isn't necessarily what's going to happen with these two kids. That I'm thinking that they caused the problem more than they solved the problem. That you've got to watch out with these kind of I don't know what you want to call it. If it's Ruach HaKodesh, Navi, all of that stuff, it's never, unless you're Moshe, it's not clear. So therefore,
it's not right. It's not clear. It's not clear. And we know too much of the story. Once again, on the level of Pshat, there's kicking, there's things going on, but it's not about who's a Russian, who's a tzaddik. And I would try to underscore again and again is when you're reading the story, to appreciate that Chazal are trying to understand, we're all trying to understand, how did it happen that from the house of such great tzaddikim emerged not only the greatest tzaddik, but also his mirror image? And it is more of a question than any answer we could bring to bear, unless we can understand that there were factors at play that still leave us with the mystery of why does Shem do this, but at least make us understand that there was nothing that Rivka and Yitzchak did. It was ingrained. It was meant to be. Hashem wanted it that way. Now, why does Hashem want it that way? That's a question we still have to try to parse. So we're probably not going to come to an entirely satisfactory answer. But the reality of the pshat is there's kicking in her womb and she wants to understand why. And she goes to ask Hashem and she gets the answer. And the answer is there are two nations within you and two nations that will emerge from you. Great. It doesn't say who's a Rasha and who's a tzaddik. Chazal give us midrashim to understand, well, the kicking was over here, the kicking was over there. So she had a tough pregnancy. Why'd she have to go consult with the Navi? Drosh Hashem. According to most, she's going to ask in the Beit Midrash. According to some, she's davening. Why? Something is unnatural. Something here is happening that is beyond our basic understanding of what's meant to happen in a pregnancy. And therefore, she understands there's some deeper, more profound meaning to it. So what's the answer? Oh, there are two nations in here. Now, is that solace? Now I understand there's two nations. So therefore, they should be kicking when they're babies. Like, what's the connection, right? And it's only Chazal. Once we get to the layer of Chazal, and no one should misunderstand. We've learned many times together for years. I'm not suggesting that Chazal came along afterward and sort of filled in and made things up. The point is not that way. It's that there's a level of layer of pshat. We're meant to understand something on one level of how things are transpiring, but understand that there are deeper levels as well. Things that could not be seen. In other words, why didn't the Navi just say to her, oh, one child will be a tzaddik, one child will be a Rasha? It's not what it says. What does it say? You'll have two nations. So you'll have two nations. I mean, why is that so terrible? So just consider that everything we're dealing with Rosh, Tzaddik, all these things, it's almost like after the fact, we should just be aware there were a lot of signs that indicated that this was the direction it was going to go. And it's not related to anything that happened in the home of Rivka and Yitzchak. But then why did Hashem let that happen? That's where we left with the question. Okay, we don't see the full picture clearly because we don't know. Rochelle's waiting and Faith is waiting. Hold on, Rochelle first.
And it says here where the mic will pass from one to the other.
Just making sure the volume's loud enough. That the what will pass?
The
might.
The mic. It seems as if they know already there's going to be conflict between them. This is like the same almost conflict in the womb.
Right.
That instead of just you having
play
two
out.
different nations, which each one can simultaneously be on their own.
Right.
Like with your children, you can have two children who
Right.
each one is great in their own field.
Yeah.
Now it's like it's either one or the other, and there's always going to be the conflict.
Right.
It's not like they're living
In harmony.
in harmony. Thank you.
Yeah. In Hachinami. Agreed. Yeah. That's correct. That seems to be implied. There's some kind of conflict going on. Yeah. Faith, what did you want to suggest?
I, like Shelley, am very troubled by the way that this sounds, even if she got a direct prophecy or if she got it secondhand. All the other prophecies in Tanakh, the voice is very strong and very mighty, and this is very murky. It does sound like a Delphic oracle, and I'm wondering if, since she grew up in a home that maybe had oracles, did she filter it through that? Do we only hear the voice in the language and in the experiences we have?
That's a great question. I have no reason to believe that this is a holdover from her household. In other words, it's very plain and level of pshat. Hashem. She didn't go asking after other things, not trafim, chas v'shalom, nothing else. She sought out Hashem, and Hashem responded. And Hashem responded. And it's very simple, direct language, which makes me feel more and more like it was the emphasis on she asked Hashem, she got an answer from Hashem. How that actually happened, secondary. Like, was it a Navi? Was it Ruach HaKodesh? Was it Shaliach? Like Shem? Was it, who was a Navi, but was it Avram Avinu? Less important. The point is she asked God for guidance, for an answer, for insight. She got it. You know what I mean? In other words, she didn't go and say, tell me the future. She just said, why is this happening to me? Lama ze anochi? And the answer came, well, because there are two nations within you. There's already some kind of inherent struggle, conflict, as you pointed out. So something here that's playing out in utero, but that's already signaling other things that are going to happen. She doesn't know what those are. We know, again, we read it because we already read it last year. And therefore we have all the preconceived notions. Well, Esav's going to be terrible. Esav's going to be a ruffian. Esav's going to be barbaric. Esav's going to be asking for hot soup to be spilled down his throat. Esav's going to be trading away his patrimony. Esav. We get that. We hear that. We know that because it happened. But this is a woman who 20 years of prayer have yielded a pregnancy where now she finds out like there's going to be some kind of, just in reading the words, and one will serve the other. Yeah, there'll be some kind of struggle going on. Anyway, Shelley and then Rosalie.
Okay, don't get me started on Chazal and Esav. I don't think the Peshat says Esav. According to the Peshat, Esav is nowhere near as bad as what they're going to say because of Rome, and that's fine. But I'll argue that part later. But the thing is, okay. Now I can't even remember. I'm so aggravated. I forgot what I was going to say. That you're.
We'll come back to you. How's that?
Okay, fine.
Fine. Rosalie, over to you.
Can you hear me? I just wanted to share with you some divrei Torah from my dad, Aleph
Oh.
Shalom. And in the pasuk before that, before we know about the two different kinds of sons, it says, Im kein lama za anochi.
Right.
And she knew at this point the numerical value is 12, Zion and Hay. So she already had the feeling that she's going to have the 12 tribes come from her. So this is like projected future.
That's nice. That's Al Derech HaRemez though, Rosalie, because right, she didn't say the word Zeh after she calculated Zeh's gematria 12. So I know the 12 tribes coming, because then she knows the future.
Who knows?
Al Derech HaRemez, she said it, but Al Derech HaPshat, we're trying to figure out what's going on at the level of Pshat. It's very, very hard to understand what all this means. It's a very big idea. She had a premonition in some way that's what's gonna happen.
Okay, we're the Shvat team. All the Shvat team did come from her.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, true enough. I'm saying the tribes did come from her. That's true. Yeah.
So there you go.
Okay, Rabbi,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Shkoch. Okay, Shelley, you remembered what was upsetting you so much?
yes, always back to Gan Eden, or shortly after Gan Eden.
Well, related to it, let's say.
Yes, okay. We have another case of two brothers fighting. And everything is either a tikkun from Gan Eden, or it's a tikkun from Cain and Hevel, or something like that. If we have two brothers fighting here, we do not have a death. In fact, Esav is going to move. He may have threatened to kill kill Yaakov.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
He doesn't, and he moves to Mount Seir, and he sort of gives over. Okay, I sold my thing. I don't want to do this. Maybe I'd be the one that would have to go on the mountain and be sacrificed. I don't want to have anything to do with that. It's yours. Goodbye. He doesn't kill his brother.
In the end, he doesn't. Although he is threatening to at a certain point. Do you remember?
But he doesn't do it.
I'm going to kill my brother. He says so, but he doesn't actually do it.
Remember with Cain, God comes to him and says,
yeah. The Fetach Hatat Vavetz, I know all about it. Right.
Okay, so in essence, Esau does that, and he should get a little bit more credit that he is not. Even if he's not a great tzaddik like Yaakov, he's not this horrible murderer of his brother. He didn't do a lot of stuff like that in there. It's all midrash of all the bad stuff that he did. In here, just because he doesn't want to take over and he's the eldest son, isn't necessarily make him this evil guy. And so I'm just trying to say, he doesn't kill his brother. We're already a step up.
Good. So based on what you're saying, could I put words in your mouth and ask you, would it make sense then for the next sentence possibly to be that there is a bigger trend playing out in the birth of Yaakov and Esav than simply two brothers who are fated to have a struggle, but rather it's the playing out of a dynamic that began, a dynamic of competition, a dynamic of brotherly hatred, a dynamic of a lack of care, concern, responsibility for the other that began, unfortunately, already in the garden between Cain and Hevel. It ended very badly there. And now this is a replay where there is actually some evolutionary advancement. Things are taking another step in a positive direction. Would it be fair to say that?
Yes.
And if that was the case, then would that, again, small comfort for Yitzchak and Rivka as parents, but for us as readers, understanding these were not just stam, two people who had children. These are two, there's a patriarch and a matriarch of the world, as far as we're concerned, of the Jewish people, right? And therefore have a leadership role in so much of the world in terms of what they signify, symbolize, etc. And here we learn about two brothers who, while there is going to be conflict between them, it doesn't have to end in death.
No, it doesn't have to it doesn't have to end in selling your brother into slavery either. Like,
wait, we're coming to that. That's the next one. You're right up to Rosalie's point about Rivka being the progenitor of 12 tribes and the fissure and the split there and trying to repair it. But could you join me in appreciating that, seeing this story, that look, let's say she had had a horrible pregnancy and all she did was say to her husband, oh, this is just so terrible. And he said to her, yeah, what can we do? But this is what we prayed for and it'll be okay. Then they have 2 children. Then the children grow up. Then the whole story plays out, right? In a certain way, the story still is the story. But what she did is she said, but I want to know in advance, or I want to know why this is happening, or what it augurs, or why this pregnancy feels unnatural. And to borrow from, what is it, Ibn Ezra, I asked all the other women and they said, well, they've never had a pregnancy like this. So there must be some bigger force, bigger dynamic at play. What could it be? What could it be? Let me ask Hashem. And what's the answer back? Well, if you really want to know, I'll tell you. And the answer she gets back, it's not clear that it's adding comfort as much as it's clarifying. But now it's almost like Avram Avinu asking Hashem in that instance, how will I know that I will inherit it? So she says, do you really want to know? I'll tell you. You're going to have that. There's going to be exile for 400 years. What? So some draw a causal link. You asked and you doubted. Therefore, the punishment is exile. And others who say that's a pretty harsh punishment for a person asking a simple question, which is entitled perhaps to ask. He's wondering, he's curious, who should he ask? Ask Hashem. But now the knowledge of what's coming in the future is not always of comfort. Sometimes it's actually something that puts a person on notice and is itself challenging to know, to learn. In other words, without getting into all the comparative religion pieces over here, Kadosh Baruch Hu is not only a Kol Yachol, he's omnipotent, but he's a Kol Yodea. He's omniscient. So past, present, future, he knows the whole thing. Now, how do we reconcile that with free will, with everything else? We don't know how to do it. That's what we learned in Pirkei Avot just now, right? That it's we don't get it. We don't know how that works. It's the Rambam writing. It's wider than the ocean. We don't know how that works. We have free will. We know. We assert. We affirm as a matter of faith. We have free will. And by the by, Shem knows everything. How are those 2 things true? A contradiction that we have trouble wrapping our heads around because we are locked into the physical dimensions of time and space. And Shem is not. Somehow he sees the whole picture. So if he knows, why does he prevent bad things? And if he knows, how does he give us reward for making the right choice? And if he knows, then what choice are we really making? All great questions. The questions of time immemorial. What happens here is a woman says, I have problems. What do? I take them to Hashem. I ask Hashem for help. And I ask Hashem, I want to understand. Totally draw to Hashem. And the answer came back. Okay, there's 2 nations. And yes, there's going to be a struggle. But right here, right now, on this shear, what did we say? I didn't say it. Shelley said it. The dynamic of 2 brothers not getting along and one literally, physically killing the other actually happens. Except it doesn't happen in this dynamic. It even gets close to the brink where one brother says about the other brother, I will kill him. But he doesn't end up doing it. Right? And if you see it that way, you realize, okay, but she knows there's going to be a struggle and she knows there's 2 nations, which is very sad and yet very happy. She's also going to have, like Rosalie said, Zion, Hey, Gematria, Yud Bet, there's going to be the 12 tribes, which is true. But also there's the other side, is the Esav side. Maybe it's the working out of the Cain Hevel story. Maybe it's the working out of Tov and Ra from Eitz Hadat, Tov Vara. The 2 things are together. And maybe the challenge of Yitzchak and Rivka is to see if there are ways, certainly Yitzchak seems to take up this charge, how to bring Esav to the highest potential that he could have in a positive vein. So worthy of consideration, no? The reality that they're locked into it, it doesn't mention, by the way, that there'll be a struggle between the 2 of them, that either of them is a Rasha. It just says Ulaomi Laomi Amatz Virav Yavod Sa'ir. On the level of Pshat, it doesn't say there's a wicked one and a good one. It just says there's going to be some struggle between them and one will serve the other. You with me so far? Did I lose you? There's like a lot of silence. You hear what I'm saying? Okay, now just watch how this goes, and particularly in the rendering of the Sforno, which I'll pick up in a moment. He has a brilliant idea about this, to think about what it means. So, Pasuk Chavdalad, Vimlu Yamel Aledet, Bine Tomim Bevitna. She finally gave birth, and behold, she has it is twins in her belly, right? Now we already knew it was twins in her belly because I thought that's what it meant. Vayomer Hashem la shnei goyim b'vinech. There are two nations in your belly, and two countries, two nationalities, two peoples that will separate from your innards, right? That will emerge. And one will be struggling with the other, something like that. And the elder or the greater will serve the younger, something like that. Do you realize, though, that it still doesn't mean in Pasuk Chaf Gimel that it's twins? It just means there are two nations. Maybe those two nations are in one person. Maybe the struggle is going to be tearing a person apart because within that one person are two different nations. It's not clear. And when you get to Pasuk Chaf Daled, V'hinei Tumim b'vitna, it's as if it's like a revelation. Behold, there are twins. Okay, I know. V'hinei, we knew that was going to be true, right? So it's only at that moment that it became clarified for the people in the story. So says Rashbam. Excuse me. B'chol davar chidush ragil lomar kein. Every time there's something that's new, it says it that way. V'chein v'hi baboker v'hinei hi Leah. Behold, it was in the morning, and behold, it was Leah. Ki ad ata haya savur shehi Rachel. Till then, Yaakov thought it was Rachel in the bedroom. In Parshat Miketz, v'ikatz paro v'hinei chalom. Right? Paro awoke and it was a dream. He didn't think it was a dream until he woke up. Only at that moment did she realize it was twins. Based on what she heard from Hashem, she doesn't know Shnei Goyim b'vitnech means there's literally two people. She thinks it means there is one person from whom eventually there will be a split. Sorry. Right? So just think about what that means. Now, when you look at it that way, yes, Rashi does tell us, Shnei Goyim b'vitnech, right? Shnei le'umim, one is a Rasha, one is a tzaddik. It says so, but it doesn't have to be that way. Rashi gives us something that's really challenging, but it's really maybe of a kind with what Rosalie mentioned before, verse 23. Look at the word goyim, how it's spelled. It's not spelled properly. I mean, it's proper because what the Torah says. But it's two yods. Yeah? You see it? So what's a little bit strange is that Rashi thinks, he didn't make it up, he got it from the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. It refers to two people who were going to be friends, who were going to live in a place called Sipori many, many, many centuries later. Antoninus and Rebbe. Antoninus is some kind of a Roman governor, a wealthy magnate, and Rebbe is a very wealthy prince of the Jewish people. Rebbe dies in circa 219 of the Common Era. Circa, we don't know exactly, something like that. Some say 220 something, but Rebbe, who redacted the Mishnah, Rebbe, who had a friendship with Antoninus and with whom he interacted. And what draws them together, Shnei Goyim b'vitnech, with two yuds, Shnei Geim Ktiv, that they never lacked radishes, they didn't lack lettuce, whether it was in the days of the summer or in the days of the winter, i.e. they were very wealthy. Or to say it differently, even though they were, of course, totally different in their priorities, their religion, their commitments, there was a certain parallel between Antoninus and Rabbi. And as we know, Chazal understand the birth of Edom, Edom representing Rome in the mind of Chazal over and over and over again, having some kind of ability to have a relationship, a rapprochement. To wit, it doesn't end with Rome killing off Israel. They do terrible things, but they don't destroy them. We were here. Zez Antoninus v'Rabbi. It's just a nice idea, but also there's some idea here that there's some kind of either competition or back and forth that's happening between the two nations. And the notion of what would later be written about even in modern philosophy, Rome and Jerusalem, two different polarities, right? And then when you throw into the mix that the HRE, the so-called Holy Roman Empire, which many people point out was not holy, not really Roman, and not really an empire. A lot of people like to say that. So where did they put the capital city? They moved it from Jerusalem. All right. They moved it Davka where? Davka to Rome. Right? Davka, that's where it went. Rashi's living in that world where Rome, and its inheritors, Christianity, are ruling the world, or much of the world. And the idea that's already prefigured here, Shnei Goyim Bevitnech, Shnei Geyim Bevitnech, two who are proud, two who have their own wealth and their own power and their own followers, call it what you will. So there's something here in the language itself that's meant to show us that it's prefiguring struggles that will come later, right? So you'll see already that there's going to be a split, right? And they will not be able to be, Chazal say, a parity between the two. There'll always be one above and one below. One is up, the other is down. The other is down, the other is up. It won't be that they just live side by side until the end of days, until from the book of Ovadia. Okay, Rochelle, you had a comment.
The double yod is also the way that Hashem's name is.
Yeah, and many Chumashim and Sidurim, they do write it that way. That's true. Yeah.
So is there a connection in there somehow? Hashem is in the mix.
Yeah, I'm skeptical only because I'll stop you right there. In the Tanakh, I'm not aware that it ever uses Yud Yud. You have it in Sidurim, they printed Yud Yud for Hashem's name. I don't see it in Tanakh.
That's somehow he's
Yeah, involved in the whole mix.
Up and down.
Yecholiot.
Could you?
I don't reject it. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. What?
Could you please repeat her comment? We can't hear her comment.
Oh, I raised the volume so you could hear her. That the Yud Yud, in some places you find in Sfarim, represents Hashem's name. So maybe it's signifying God is in the midst of it, God is involved, etc. Yud Yud, Gimel and Yud Mem with the Yud Yud in the middle. But I pointed out that in Tanakh, I don't know of examples where Yud Yud next to each other represents the name of Hashem. That spelling seems to be only in Sidurim and later texts. You don't find it really in Tanakh. It's not impossible. So I don't reject it. I don't really see it so much in the Tanakh. I'm just pointing out with some of these things that Chazal understood. We understand that since the to use another omni, or use already omnipotent and omniscient. So I'll throw in a third one, omnisignificant, and that is to say that every word, every letter, every kol kotz v'kotz, every jot and tittle that's on every letter in the Torah has some kind of a meaning, and we're trying to mine it for its meaning, to understand it on our level. According to many of the Mefarshim, omnisignificance drills down even to the letters, the spellings, etc. Others don't see it exactly that ratcheted up in the focus of the microscope. They see it more in general terms. But whatever the case, we're mining, trying to understand, and we're trying to understand our own conflicts, our own issues, sort of on the world stage, and to try to appreciate what it augurs for us. But just even that little point that the Rashbam in verse 24, that Pasuk Chav Daled, behold, it was twins. We knew it was twins from the Pasuk before. No. We know in retrospect it's twins. But even from that Pasuk, it's not clear. And,
Rabbi, could I?
Is that Helen?
Interrupt? Yes.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah, we got a contrast here, the story of Yishmael and the story of Esau.
Yes.
So the contrast, Yishmael just goes away, and he's a mix. He's Abraham's child and he's Hagar's child. Yeah. And so he just simply goes away and does his murder and mayhem at a later time in another way.
Although we did see also that he did tshuva, according to some. So, okay.
Right. Okay. But this story now takes another twist that the two brothers that are oppositional are coming from two same-like parents.
Yes, yes.
And one is being called a Russia right away, and you're bringing in about Rome and Edom, so the murder and mayhem continues. And why are we suddenly having two versions of two brothers?
Based on exactly what you said, and referencing what we talked about a little while ago when Shelley was mentioning it, isn't it a step up from the story of Yitzchak and Ishmael, where you could explain it away that Ishmael is not from the same mother? She's from Egypt. But here, this is Rivka Imenu, who has these two children. And also there had to be a working out of how they were going to get along. Maybe, could be.
And it seemed that they kind of just had a mild oppositional until the lentil soup. Then everything became more dramatic.
Right. I wouldn't even say the lentil soup, by the way. I think they kind of put that one to bed. They were teenagers. They had the discussion and yeah, sold it. Yeah, who cares? It was really at the time of the bracha, decades later. That's
right.
when it comes. That's when it, to me, that's when it comes unraveled.
Right.
So,
right.
You know, just to
suddenly it flares up at that time, and
yeah.
rightfully so.
Yeah. Shelley had another comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Helen. Shelley.
Yes, going into Peshat, it's the next two in 25 and 26 when they're named. Why is Esav named by two parents, and why is Yaakov only named by one parent?
I'm glad you brought that up. Let's read the psukim inside, because now with the birth comes the description, the physical description. When Yitzchak Avinu was born, you hear nothing. When Rivka Imenu was born, you hear nothing. Pick anybody in Tanakh, pretty much. We don't hear about what they looked like at the moment they emerged from the womb. You just don't hear about it. But a pasuk Chaf Hei, Vayetzeh Harishon Admoni, a ruddy complexion, right? A ruddy complexion. Kulo ki aderet seyar. He's hairy. And Vayikru Shmo Esav, and they called his name Esav. So now Rashi, Admoni, Siman shehu yehei shofech damim. He had a ruddy complexion. It's a sign that he will spill blood. I mean, it's an infant. 6 pounds, 2 ounces. I don't know, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Oh, by the way, he's going to be spilling blood. There you go. Mazel tov as your baby. All right. So what? Kulo kaderet seyar. He has like a mantle of hair. Malei sar katalit shel tzemer hamleah se'ar. He looks like a talus made of wool, i.e., a talit doesn't mean a talus like what tzitzis, it means a cloak. Right? Flokida. Belaz. It's old French. I don't know how to translate that. Vayikru Shmo Esav. They called him Esav. Hakol Karu Lokein. Everybody called him that. Lefi Shehaya Naaseh v'Nigmar b'Saro Kiven Shanim Harbei. He looked completed. He looked like he was much more mature than he was because he had a lot of hair. And then who's born? Then his brother came out. Obviously, it's his brother that came out. But the point is, he's second. He's the brother. Viado ochazet ba'akev Esav, and his hand is holding on to the ankle of Esav. His hand is holding on to Esav's ankle. Esav already seems to be named, or at least the narration tells us that Esav was named. It's not that the brother came out is holding on to the ankle of the other one. He's holding to the ankle of Esav. He has a name. And in the singular, Vayikra Shemo Yaakov, and he called him Yaakov. He called him Yaakov. Who's he? Yitzchak ben Shishim Shana beledo tam. Yitzchak is 60 years of age. What does Rashi say right away? Vayikra Shemo Yaakov. Rashi writes one word. Well, it's one acronym based on the Medrash Tanchuma. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem called him that, and that's why it doesn't say who it is, because God is involved. God said his name should be Yaakov. Davar acher, another interpretation of Rashi. Aviv Karlo Yaakov, Al Shem Achizat HaEkev. The other interpretation is that his father called him Yaakov because he saw that he was holding on to the ankle of the first one.
Devar acher? You're saying it's a devar acher?
It
That
says
means
Devar
Rashi,
Acher, which reminds us what methodologically. We see Devar Acher.
Rashi doesn't like his answers. He's
Not
hedging
doesn't
his-
like. He sees a weakness in each one, right? Vayikra lo could have said Vayikra lo Hashem Yaakov. Doesn't say that. God's name is not mentioned. So what even God? Vayikra lo. God is not a subject in this story. God can't be calling. Why is God calling? But on the other side, it does switch. It's glaring that in Pasuk Chaf Hey, it's Vayikreu Shemo Esav. They called him, which, by the way, you could have also just said means the parents called him that. Vayikra Shemo Esav Yaakov, just one of them. In the same pasuk that tells us that Yaakov was called Yaakov, the last part of the same verse sounds like a non sequitur, and Yitzchak was 60 years of age when the boys were born. Right? So Ben Shishim Shana. So when you think about this, you think, oh, wait a minute. Well, why is Yitzchak being mentioned here? Oh, it must be Vayikra lo Yaakov. And that's because the Vayikra Shemo Yaakov is Yitzchak. Therefore, it tells you, and by the way, you want to know something else about Yitzchak? He is 60 years of age when the boys are born, which also leaves us again scratching our heads. Why do we need to know that information right at this moment? Right? It's just strange. So, it's strange that that should be phrased that way. So if you say Hashem, okay, so it's Hashem, and by the by, Hashem called him Yaakov, and the pasuk also tells us that Yitzchak Avinu was 60 years of age. It throws it in. But why does it throw it in? It's a bit of a mystery. It could have given us the ages another time. Or could have been its own pasuk. Just consider that already at the moment of their birth, we know something about the physical appearance of Esav, and we know nothing about the physical appearance of Yaakov. We don't hear it. We don't see it. It's not here. Right? There seems to be, again, a foreshadowing of things that are going to come later. Right? By the way, he's going to spill blood. So does it mean he's going to be a murderer or a shoichet or a hunter or a surgeon? They're all different things. A bloodletter in those days, they would have said. So why is it written, that way? And that's a question. That's a question, huh?
I have a problem with the fact that because he was an Adomi,
Yeah.
that immediately means he was going to murder and brought
Right. Right.
Because also David, well, actually David did go to war.
Right. We discussed
But
about
he was
David.
also
Right. We talk about all the parallels, but Meidan makes a big timus out about with good reason. The comparisons with David HaMelech, he also was Admoni, right? So people say it means he had red hair, but it's not clearly red hair. It seems to be like a reddish complexion. That means that he was he looked ready. He had a certain it seems like his blood ran hot. Now, is it the case that it's a sim? What do you mean it's a simon? He's stuck. It's like we decided that's who he is. Or is that the understanding of the people, and therefore they give him the cues that set him up for it? Oh, you're an Admoni, the little boy. You should take a bow and arrow. So that's what ends up developing, and then ex post facto they say that. But it's also what he ends up becoming. Again, it is an amalgam with Chazal and all of this. Certainly, he's a hunter of animals. That's certain. That's in the pshat. It says, right? But Sudalitzai, that's what Yaakov Yitzchak says out to. The question is, was the fact that he was Admoni a sign that he was going to be one who spills blood? Or later on, when he became that, they said, Taka, when he was born, this was the characteristic we said about him. And maybe on some subconscious level, they set him up for it. I'm not suggesting his parents are complicit. I'm saying society. Vayikru Shemo Esav. Esav meaning asui. He's made, he's finished, he's complete. There was an element of maturity to him beyond his years. He's growing up faster than other kids in a certain way. Here he is called this by everyone who sees him, right? And they're looking at him and realizing, wow, this guy bespeaks power. What's the other guy doing? He's holding on to the ankle. So he called him Yaakov, maybe just because of that's what happened. And it's a strange name to name the child after the hand that's grabbing onto the ankle of the one that came out before. I mean, but it does certainly, again, on a symbolic level, Isn't there a conflict there?
It could also be actually very negative because he's holding on.
Right.
He will always be the one who's underneath.
Good.
the-
He's struggling to get above. Who's making the struggle? The first kid who came out or the second kid who's holding on? Who's guilty of the struggle in a way? Now, as we will see, there's going to be a playing out of the dynamic between the two of them. It's only in retrospect that we can look back. Oh, he was a murderer. Oh, look at how he was born. Oh, look, he was kicking for Avodah Zarah. But you have to realize, I think that's what Chazal are indicating as well. They are looking back at the retrospective and understanding there were all these signs that you could not have seen in advance, but in retrospect seem patently obvious. How much of it was the nature and how much of it was the nurture or the lack of nurture? That we have to leave for another time. Shelley had a closing question or comment before we say goodbye.
Yes, you're talking about the naming Yaakov because his hand is on the heel. Well, does that indicate that Rivka told Yitzchak about what the prophecy was or what
Not
she
clear.
was told?
Not clear.
Okay, because otherwise she's not naming him. It's either God or, according to this, it's God or it's Yitzchak. So if
Yes.
Yitzchak doesn't know about this,
Yes.
then why would he name him after the heel business?
Agreed.
He would know.
Agreed. It's not clear at all. Correct. Again, it could be another missed signal. Could be. Look with me at two words from the beginning of the next pasuk. I hate to end in the middle of a pasuk, but we have to here. Vayigdelu hane'arim. The boys grew up. Then Esav became one who knew about hunting. He was a man of the field. Yaakov is a man who is whole, complete, simple, something like that, right? And he is or naive in some way, and he sits in tents. Just on the two words, or the four words really, Vayigdelu hane'arim vayhi Esav. The boys grew up, and behold, Esav became. Rashi says, Kol zman shayu ketanim lo hayu nikam b'ma'aseihem. While they were young, they were not known by their deeds, i.e., they seemed to be the same. They were twins, they were boys, they were brothers. Vein adam daktik behem mativam. No one paid close attention to what their character or nature might be. Kevan shenasu b'nei shlosh esrei. Once they became the age of bar mitzvah, zeh piresh labati midrashot, v'zeh piresh la'avodah zarah. This one went to the Beit Midrash, and that one went to idolatry. The split happened only in adolescence. But while they were young, none of these things were playing out. There wasn't the Rush and the Tzaddik. There wasn't the choices that they made. And don't forget, of course, when you're 13 in antiquity, certainly, you're not going to high school and college and graduate school. You're taking up your profession already. Your apprenticeship is well underway at age 13. And the point is, what we say today, this bar mitzvah, etc. But the point here is already then there was a divergence between them that did not, even though there's all the midrashim in utero, when you look at it in the level of pshat, it didn't happen there. Here's Vayigdelu hane'arim. Once they grew up from being boys and they were turning into men, that's when the divergence happened, and the differentiated careers that they chose for themselves. What we'll have to see next time, we just do not have time to see right now, is to try to understand. We will have a shiur, God willing, next week. If everyone's available, I'm available. We'll have the shiur next week, 9:15. It's Memorial Day weekend, but no reason not to have a shiur, especially since we missed last week. I was out of town. So looking forward to that. And I got to let everybody go. It's already after 10 o'clock. So thanks for coming. We'll see you next week.